Hi everyone, welcome to Hear Our Voices. I'm Knox, and today I have the honor to introduce the author of The Black Kids, Christina Hammonds Reed. Hi,
Hi, everyone.
we're so excited to have you here and to have the tour for the Black Kids. We're just, I don't know how to say it, except we're incredibly hyped and we're really excited and can't wait for everyone to read it when it comes out.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be able to share the book with just people of color and women and just a more diverse set of people. It makes me so happy.
All right. Before we start, I would like to say Hear Our Voices is a book tour company that we've created. Our goal is to get Own Voices books into the hands of Own Voices creators so we can uplift their voices and the stories that are meant for them. So our tours revolve around Own Voices, reviewers, and books, which is, again, another reason why we think it's so important that we have the tour for the Black kids to get it into the hands of Black readers. So that said, let's get into the questions.
Let's
I
do
got my
it.
little pitch. All right. So what's, just to learn more about you, what's like a random fact that you think people should know about you that they don't already? It could be like a fun fact or something serious, either one.
A fun fact is, I think I was a mermaid in a past life. I absolutely love being in the water. For some reason, water always factors into the stories I'm telling. Even
Mm-hmm.
with the Black kids, there's the pool, there's the ocean. So I think that for whatever reason, I'm so drawn to stories about water, and just it's like my second home, or maybe even my first home.
Well, Leland's gonna love that. She's really into mermaids. She is. She's gonna love that. All right. So you were a mermaid in a past life. Sounds wonderful. All right. The second question is to describe the Black kids to those who might just be hearing about it right now for the first time.
So The Black Kids is a coming of age story that centers around Ashley Bennett, who's a wealthy Black teen against the backdrop of the 1992 LA riots. So it's really about her, I would say it's her coming of age story and her learning to love herself a little more, to love other people better, and really learning to love her Blackness over the course of the novel, which is something I think she struggles with prior to the novel's beginning. But by the end of it, she really starts to see herself as part of a community.
Awesome. I love that you wrote about the LA riots because I'm from LA. I've been here my whole life, and it's not taught about.
No, like not even
Not.
when you grow up here. Like it's really just kind of glossed over. Like, yeah, that happened. And it's so strange because it was such a big moment for the city. And yeah, I'm so excited you're from LA though.
Yeah, my I grew up on stories because I'm mixed, so I'm Black on my dad's side, and my dad told me about being a mixed Black guy living in Inglewood during the time of the LA riots.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so I grew up hearing about this, and I talked to other people from LA, and they're like, "What are you talking about?
Really?
It's not taught here."
No, it's not. I feel like if you were alive when it happened, everybody I talked to who was alive and uh, in the city then, they always have like these really great stories about
Mhm.
what they were doing and what they remember of it. But I feel like for people who are even younger, it's not something that really gets revisited in the same way, which is kind of strange, given how many correlations there are between then and now. And it's kind of like a
Yeah.
from between what happens with Rodney King and what we see now in Black Lives Matter. So it's so strange that that's not really something that young people get taught, right?
Yeah, when I was 14, we read To Kill a Mockingbird, and so my teacher did like a little project where we looked more into different instances, and she had a list, and on it was the LA riots, and I swear I was the only kid in that class who knew what they were.
Wow, that's
So,
crazy.
right? It's
Insane.
LA.
That's a failure of American education right there, right?
Yeah.
Like that is really, really crazy. But it just goes to show you how much history isn't taught and who's served by that, right? Like why do we
Mm-hmm.
not teach kids these things? Why don't we educate kids about all different kinds of histories and like the history of racial trauma in this country. So it's like, if we can learn about the Pilgrims, we can learn about something that happened just a few years ago or 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, 30 years ago.
Yeah. So
Like, I
that's,
saw you mentioned Latasha Harlins,
yes.
and I was like, oh my goodness, because what happened to her is glossed over even more than what
Yes.
happened to Rodney King.
Yes, it's true. And I think it really goes back to, in some ways, how much Black women are erased when it comes to these struggles. Like, she was 15, she's a baby, and she gets shot over orange juice.
Orange
Like,
juice.
that she was going to pay for. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the community was outraged by it, rightfully so. For those who are watching who don't know what happened, like, her killer got off basically a slap on the wrist. So it's I think she's like one of those first instances in more recent times that we see of Black women being erased from the conversation about what it means to have like these biases and how that leads to death, unnecessary death, but also how she helps to build that frustration that leads to these riots. Like, you hear Rodney King, but he was just like the breaking point. He wasn't the starting point. So yeah, I wish her name were brought up more too, and her story was brought up more. And it's just kind of, I didn't really dig into it and learn more about it until college, like you said, where I grew up here. And why is it something that we weren't taught, or why wasn't it revisited over the course of all the years that followed? I think it's starting to a little bit more now, but not like the way it needs to be.
Yeah, Ashley and Joe say in the book, right, that could have been them.
Right, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, for so many of us who are like Black women moving through the world, Black people moving through the world, you see things on TV and you're like, that could be me, that could be my cousin, that could be my best friend. Like, it's such a painful, visceral thing whenever you see these things. And I think that we process these things in like such a complicated way, right? Like, it's the injustice of it, but also like the visceral feeling of like, that could be somebody I love or me. And I think Joe feels that a little bit more strongly than Ashley, but that's just because Ashley's trying to like figure out who she is over the course of the novel and what she's about.
I think at the end, it felt like she got there. Like maybe Joe was still a little bit more, but I feel like Ashley definitely grew throughout the novel.
Yeah, and for me that was important. Like, I know that a lot of times Joe would be the focus of the novel, like the person who is out there fighting, but it was important to me to have Ashley because Ashley's struggling with a lot of it. Like, Ashley's not by any means a perfect person, and maybe not even a good person at the very beginning of the novel. She's like kind of not nice. And what's important is not where she starts, but where she ends up. And I think that so many of us, it's like true to life. Like, it's all about growth and all about discovering who you are and what's important to you. And I think that, especially for young people reading it, it's okay if you're not the most educated on these matters. It's not, I mean, it's okay if you're not like the most politically active. It's okay to like kind of not know who you are, but then the growth is like super important for all of us moving forward, and to like coming into it and really coming into your power and your passion and all of that. So it was important to me that she not be perfect. And I think also a lot of times you get the stereotype of like the strong Black woman, and it's damaging because we're not really seen as people. It's just kind of, we get seen as symbols, and I wanted somebody who was delicate and messy, and she's a little broken, but it's her journey of like repairing herself.
Yeah, I think I just answered. We just answered one of my later questions,
Oh,
which
really?
was talking about Ashley and Joe. No, that's perfect. There's no order to any of it. It's all good. So while we're there, also want to ask you about LaShawn, because you wrote. I thought at first reading it, I'm like, okay, so this isn't gonna focus on him, and then it's like, oh, hello. Like, he's in it for the rest of the book, and he shows
Right.
up, and I love him so much.
Oh no, you fall in love with him over the course of the book, right? Like I fell in love with him in the course of writing him. I'm like, this man is amazing. This little boy is amazing.
Yeah. So how would you describe him to the readers?
So LaShawn is kind of the school golden boy. He's the star basketball player. He's super smart. He's the kind of kid that's nice to everyone. He's very gracious, and he's also kind of a cool kid. So in the course of the novel, I think his frustration stems from uh, a rumor that gets started that Ashley helps to start about him being involved in the riots. And we see him cracking under the weight of that pressure to be perfect, to do everything right, and still face these like really awful stereotypes because of his background and where he comes from. But he's still very gracious, I think, over the course of the text. Like he has his explosion, and it's just because it's real, it's honest, he's hurting. And I think that I wanted to write a Black boy from South LA who wasn't like a stereotype of what Black boys from South LA are portrayed to be in a lot of things. Like he's a sensitive kid, he's a smart kid, he's a thoughtful kid, and he has this explosion of anger that's, I think, kind of justified. But at the end of the day, he's just like this beautiful spirit, and I wanted him to engage with her also because I think it was a good way to examine class. Like Ashley's very privileged and LaShawn is not, and putting two Black people together who are from very different backgrounds isn't something we see as much. Like I think we see a lot about um, Black people in inner cities or Black people in their own experiences in the suburbs, and you don't really see as much about what does it mean to connect to each other across class backgrounds, and acknowledging some privileges that one of you may have over the other. So that was how I wanted to write him, just to sort of honor the beauty in Black boyhood as much as anything too, and to celebrate that instead of just portraying a stereotype.
I loved reading about him because he's so kind to everyone, and then like it broke my heart when he snapped.
Yeah.
Because it was so much, and
it's so much pressure for that poor kid to always have to be a certain way. And yeah,
his mom though snapping at the principal was wonderful.
yes, she's
And I love her.
baby, right? Like her baby deserves better.
All her points are valid, and she just laid them all out there, and it was wonderful, and I loved that. All right, so what would you say is the heart of the book?
So I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I've been talking about the Black Kids as a series of love letters. And so I've been saying how I really think it's a love letter to Los Angeles, our home.
Mm-hmm.
It's a love letter to the 90s. It's a love letter to girlhood and those like super intense friendships you have when you're young. And it's also very much a love letter to Blackness and the Black family, Black childhood, and the beauty of being Black, even when it's sometimes really hard to be Black in this country that really devalues Blackness. So I think the one main thing that I want people to take away from it is love. Like it's very much about love, even though on the surface level, Ashley may seem to not be about that at first. It's really about her growing to love all of these different things and all these different people and her city and herself. So I think that's the main thing to take away from it.
All right, I like that. So, okay, we talked a little bit about this too, but I mentioned how someone who's grown up, in the area, it's not something we're taught. And I was reading this and I had to keep reminding myself in a way, this is the 90s, this isn't 2020, because this is stuff that's still happening. It's still going on all of the time. I mean, I would read like the 90s parts where I could see the love letter to the 90s. When they're like, she's listening to some Tejana singing Como la Flor. I'm like, but I had to remember she wasn't popular, that like Selena in 1992.
Right.
So I was like,
She hadn't exploded yet.
I was like, oh my goodness. And I can see like the different 90s parts. But without, it still could have been 2020, it feels like. So what made you decide to write about 92 specifically with the LA riots?
Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy because it's so relevant now. But at the time when I was writing it, I thought I was using um, the past to really examine the present. So I thought I was looking at 1992 and seeing how it was really like one of the first times that we see police brutality against an individual captured on camera by a civilian. So for people who grew up with smartphones, like it was a big deal that somebody was able to capture what they captured with their camcorder and that like super grainy footage and have it then be broadcast on the news. Like we've grown accustomed to that now, but in 1992 it wasn't the norm. And the national, local, and even international response was very new and very fresh then. And the way that the city exploded afterward, after the cops were acquitted, um, was really something I wanted to examine, and how that correlates to now and how it correlated to the Trayvon Martins of the world, the Tamir Rice, to Sandra Bland, like how that police, unequal policing and police brutality uh, finds its way into the present. Um, Here, a lawnmower, I think, right? um,
Yeah, they're doing the garden or
right.
the.
I'm always crossing my fingers that the gardener doesn't come back there and start, right?
They were
Um,
right here earlier, so I'm there. Just go farther.
yeah, like back up. So I really wanted to look at that, and I thought I was holding like a mirror up, but I didn't realize it was going to become so much our present. Like I had no idea we were going to find ourselves in that same moment, and with the George Floyd protests and kind of the national and international outpouring of frustration, or the fact that this keeps happening, and it's not just in the US, it's not just in LA, it's worldwide. So it's very crazy to me that it speaks so much to the present moment, but I also think maybe it hopefully can help some people navigate their feelings, and just sort of explore their own responses to these things. And for people who aren't white people or people of, I'm sorry, aren't Black people or people of color, maybe it can also help them understand a bit more where we're coming from. Because so much of the frustration, I think, is in there in terms of how Joe feels, in terms of how LaShawn feels, in terms of how Ashley's trying to figure out how she feels. And we're so often like just viewed as angry Black people or people who are looting because of lawlessness, as opposed to like, this is an outpouring of anger over something that has happened historically and keeps happening to us. And what does that mean? So it's weird that it's weird, and it's also so wrong that it's so relevant right now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we really haven't come that far, as much as people want to say that we've progressed so much. Like we really haven't, and that's a problem. And I think hopefully people are starting to wake up to that now.
Yeah. I asked Gramps during the previous the protests in June, or they're still happening, but back when the media was covering it.
Right.
And I asked him when was the last time LA had been put under a curfew, because that has never happened to me in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know they could do that.
Right.
And he said it was during the 92 riots. And I'm like, oh, frick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And it was terrifying too, like living here during the curfew, because I had to go. I live in Hermosa Beach right now, and my
Mm-hmm.
sister lives in Glendale. So, LA, like that's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
drive. But I was going there to celebrate her birthday, and it's my sister's birthday. And we were all having like a little family gathering. Um, but I was late coming back for curfew. So I was supposed to have been at home. And I'm like a Black person driving on the 110 during this curfew, and realizing like this is what it must be like for my characters in the book. Like as much as I was imagining it, actually experiencing it was a very different thing. Like, oh, I hope I don't get pulled over. Oh, there are police cars everywhere. And just sort of the terror of like, what does it mean that you might get pulled over under these circumstances where the police really feel like they can crack down on you because of the curfew that's in place.
Yeah,
It's strange, right?
yeah, it's, you hear about these things,
And
like, and then,
you're living them.
yeah.
Right. And then you also see how they're used to silence people, right? Because like in Santa
Hmm.
Monica, they were trying to make people go home at 1 p.m. And it wasn't about any sort of violence or looting. It was really about like silencing protesters. Like, I don't know. I think it's a lot of stuff that we're like reflecting on now and saying like, wait a minute, like who are these things serving?
All right. So what's, wow, okay, we really did cover most of these questions actually just talking. It was, what's the main thing you want readers to take away from the Black kids?
Love. It's all about love.
All right, speed round, let's go. No.
Right.
All right, here's one. So what are some books that have inspired you as a writer?
Okay. So it's interesting because when I was younger, YA wasn't really what it is now.
Mhm.
Um, it's really a lot of the books I was reading when I was younger were more like adult novels. But some of the things that I read as a young person, Little Women, I actually read and I loved. And I think that kind of finds its way into here because it's so much about sisterhood and complicated family dynamics and just the frustration of growing up with somebody. And I think that and Joe wanting to be a writer and just being this like headstrong person, I think that actually kind of is why I may have subconsciously based the character of Joe on that Joe. Um,
Mhm.
so I loved that book. I read that book like 10 times in one year when I was really little. It was
It is
ridiculous.
not a small book.
Oh, and I was like 8 or 9. So I mean, I was a super nerdy child. Yeah,
I love
super
that.
nerdy. I preferred reading to hanging out with people, which was probably to my detriment socially. But um,
I still
I
do that. It's fine.
yeah, no, now I'm just like, it's okay, it's cool, it worked out. But Little Women, and then also these books by Mildred Taylor, the Let the Circle Be Unbroken and The Road to Memphis. They were
Mhm.
books that were about the civil rights era, and they focused on a young girl sort of navigating that. And I think that was really important to me too, to sort of see that. And I think it's also a lot of where my idea of storytelling as being political um, probably originated, and the power of that representation, especially because you didn't really see as much of that in like the 90s for kids lit. So it was a
Mhm.
big deal. Um, who else? I'm thinking as a kid, what else? I was really just reading everything as a kid, like everything I could get my hands on. And that was good and bad because there were a lot of books, there are a lot of books that we consider canon
Mhm.
that are detrimental, I think, to young Black people reading them. Like it can be very hurtful to read like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn as a Black kid in a class full of non-Black people. So it was like a good thing and a bad thing that I was always reading, but I was also dealing with the effects of those words, right? Like you read those kind of books or you read Rudyard Kipling, and there are a lot of harmful stereotypes throughout canon. So I'm thankful to YA now that young people can see themselves reflected in it and also have stories that are uplifting them and are speaking to their real concerns, as opposed to stories that kind of make you feel like I want the only representation of myself that I read to be about a slave, right? Like
Mhm.
that was so much of when I was growing up. Like that was what you were reading. It was like this person's a slave in this book. This person's a slave in this book. Oh, this person is assaulted. And there's so much more to our experience that luckily is now being published and being explored. Um, yeah, that's a long-winded answer. I love so many writers now, but that was what I was reading as a kid, just like everything I could get my hands on. And I do think it makes you a better writer, even the books that maybe are a little bit more troubling.
Mhm.
So if anybody here watching wants to be a writer, read as much as you can, listen to as much as you can, watch as much as you can. Um, and the funny thing is, I think a lot of this book was actually influenced by the movie Clueless too. uh,
I can see that actually.
yeah, no, because it was like my favorite movie when I was a kid. And I think because we always see the Black best friend in movies, right?
Mhm.
Don't really know what their experience of the world is. So a lot of this book was me thinking like, how would somebody like Dion respond to the 1992 riots? like what it means to be that character in the middle of these really turbulent times. So yeah, I'm inspired from all kinds of randomness.
Now that you pointed it out, I feel like I should have realized that. Well, I haven't seen Clueless that much though, but I feel like I should have picked up on that.
That and just music, like there's a song by Frank Ocean, Super Rich Kids or Sweet Life, like all of these things found their way into my head and like page.
I like that. Oh man, I gotta go rewatch Clueless now. My mom's gonna love it. She's always watching it. My mom was in high school in the 90s.
Oh, so
she graduated in 95.
Yeah,
so,
it's
like,
perfect sense.
She's always watching it every time it's on TV. So now I'm like,
oh,
Mom, you wanna watch Clueless with me?
You have like a mother-daughter movie night because of me.
You go, be grateful I like books so much. Okay, so we kind of answered this one too. Throughout the story, Ashley is she's a teenager dealing with normal high school drama or things that come up in her friend group while also dealing with the riots and the hatred around her.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you manage to find the balance between the two while writing it?
So it was really important to me to do so because I think so many Black characters get written as symbols or they're not like allowed to be fully dimensional. But I think in real life, a lot of us are like right now, because we're experiencing this moment right now. Yes, you are impassioned and maybe you're protesting or posting, but you're also dealing with like your regular day-to-day life. Like I gotta go do whatever, hang out with my friends, or oh, this person is getting on my nerves, or why is my mom being so annoying? I don't understand her. So it was really important to me to capture that dynamic of like, yes, there's this like turmoil going on racially, but Ashley's just a kid navigating normal kid stuff over the course of the book. And I think that's just as important, like her coming of age and her realizing that her friendships maybe don't serve her anymore, that her parents have more to them than she would have previously thought, that like your parents are people outside of their relationship with you and they have their own struggles and their own histories and their own pasts. And her relationship with her sister, I think a lot of people who have siblings can relate to like, yes, you love your sibling, but sometimes you fight with them and you struggle with them and you don't understand them. And then you go through periods of being close or maybe not as close and getting closer again. So I wanted to capture all of that, but I think it's also that they're on parallel journeys, right? Like LA is in this middle of this like huge reckoning about what kind of place it wants to be. And Ashley is in the middle of this huge reckoning about what kind of person she wants to be. And so I wanted their journeys to almost be parallel, but also this LA journey is very much pushing on Ashley's journey to be better.
Okay, I like that. I feel like I keep saying like I like that, but I do. Hey, if I like it, I'm gonna say I like it. You know?
No, it's good. We're good.
All right.
We're vibing, right?
So, this is the part about the music, which also you kind of answered with those two songs. But are there any other songs that you would associate with the characters or the book as a whole?
Oh yeah, so many. So for me, music is like such a huge part of my life period, but also like my childhood. I feel like when you're a kid, you're just like soaking in everything. You're just like absorbing all of it. Music is like so important to your sense of self and your identity and like what your parents are listening to, what your friends are listening to, what's on the radio, what's on, well now not what's on the radio, but back in the day, what's on the radio. So for me, it was really important that each of these characters have kind of a musical moment that reflects something about their journey. So I'm gonna like pull up. I have like a whole list of different songs in there.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, no, there should be like a whole soundtrack to this book because there's so many songs in there. But for Ashley, I think two songs for Ashley. One is the song "Home" from the musical The Wiz, and it's about for those of you who haven't watched it, it's like The Wizard of Oz reimagined with an all-black cast. And the song Home is a song of like yearning for a place that you want to go back to, for a place where you belong, for a place where there's love. And I think that for Ashley, that's kind of what she's searching for throughout the entire novel. Like, who is home? Where is home? What's home within herself, even? So I think that one really works for her, as well as I Am the Walrus by the Beatles, because that song, like, it seems very goofy, but the whole idea, like, we're all connected and like we're all somehow experiencing this world together. And that's like the journey that she's on over the course of the book, is relating to other people, and how we're all part of like this shared experience. For LaShawn, I think the song Beautiful Brother of Mine by Curtis Mayfield, because it's all about Black brotherhood and sisterhood, and in the metaphorical and literal sense of just like coming to love each other and supporting each other, and finding the beauty in being Black together. And I think LaShawn helps Ashley really learn that about herself, and he kind of represents that in a lot of ways, like just that shared Blackness is a really powerful connection, that opens her eyes over the course of the novel. I think Lana would be Rebel Girl by Bikini Kill. It's this like super girl punk song. And I think Lana kind of embodies that. Lana and Joe, I think are very much about that. It's very like girl empowerment, but also like girl rage, which I think is fun. Like it's we need to have outlets for our anger in meaningful ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that those two really have that in the text. With Lucia, I think it's Nothing Compares to You. She sings it in the book. It's sort of reflecting on home and what does it mean to be. I mean, the actual song is more of a love song, but for her, I think it's really about home and maybe the difficulties of coming from a place where it's sometimes more fraught to have lived there, but also the fact that like that's home and it's beautiful to you, and maybe it's not always the easiest place to live, but it's beautiful and meaningful, and it's really about her immigrant experience, I think, the way that I use it in the text. But also, I think The End of the Road, which also, once again, is a romantic song, but I think that's kind of where they are in their relationship. Like, this is an important relationship for Ashley. Her experience with Lucia is very much like formative, and what does it mean then to like let go of those bonds, and to move through the world without this person that you've cared for your entire life, who's cared for you your entire life. So I think those are just a few of the songs. Like, I could keep talking about it. And then, like I mentioned before, the Frank Ocean songs that were kind of in my head and generating a lot of stuff too, as I was thinking about character and just that search for meaning. Like, I think he uses that Mary J. Blige real love hook, searching for a real love, and it's so. I think that's like so fundamental to this text. Like, that is what they're all looking for, right? So I think that I'll just stop there so I don't keep talking on and on and on about music throughout it.
Oh, are you kidding? I already have End of the Road and Real Love stuck in my head now.
It's so good. I just really loved like the musical aspect of writing it. And I write a lot with music. I find that it's really cool. So yeah.
They're gonna be stuck in my head for the rest of the day, and I'm not about it.
This. Should come up with a kids playlist.
That would be amazing. I wonder if anybody on the tour is doing that, because that would be. If not, I'm going to do it. But I want to see if anybody else on the tour is doing that, because I'd listen to it.
Right. I think it'll be fun. I think I might actually be working on it for something, so I'll keep you guys posted.
Please do.
Yes.
I need it, like, now, preferably. I need it. All right, and the last question is, most of all, is there anything you want to say out there to the readers, to any aspiring writers, or just anybody in general?
Okay, so I think we'll take that step by step. To the readers, I think I really hope that Ashley's journey is something that either you identify with or just something that like I know that as a character she's kind of difficult for some people. Like I think it's actually we don't really see that many unlikable Black female protagonists and things, right? Like and I would call her unlikable at the start of this book.
Oh, at the beginning, absolutely.
Yeah, she's deeply unlikable. But I hope that her vulnerability and her sort of growth is something that is valuable and something that you find comfort in. And just her navigating what it means to be Black in the world and failing often, but finding the beauty in being a Black woman is something that is resonant with people who are watching this. And for aspiring writers, I would say, don't let anybody make you feel like your voice isn't worthwhile or your story shouldn't be told or that you need to have certain degrees to tell stories. I think sometimes we can feel like, oh, I need to have like this degree or I need to go to this program in order to like really know how to write or to do whatever. And that's dumb. Right? Like we all have stories to tell. Like we all have powerful stories to tell. And sometimes those institutions don't serve people of color as well as they could be in terms of actually helping those stories get told. So my advice to you would be to just keep writing, keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, keep going to plays. They do everything you can to absorb storytelling. And that I think is more important than any program long-term for your development. Like, yes, those programs are helpful sometimes, but you don't have to in terms of writing an important story to put out into the world. And also, I think there's, at the end of my acknowledgement, I use Kendrick where I'm like, we gonna be all right. And I think that's something that we all need to hear right now, right? Like we're all, this is a crappy time. Like it's hard. We're in a pandemic. We're seeing Black people getting murdered at the hands of police. We're seeing an administration that doesn't seem to value any of us who are anything other than cis white men. And I think for those of us who identify as queer or of color or as trans or whatever the case may be, we may not feel validated by the images that we're seeing and coming out of our own government, but just to take comfort that we're all in it together and that I think moving forward, we all have the power to impact change. So go out and vote. For those of you who can, go out and vote. And for those of you who can't, just do whatever you can to take care of yourself in the middle of all of this.
And with all that said, thank you so much for letting me interview you. I'm so glad that I had this chance and that we're doing the Black Kids for a tour.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
I know. I was like, yay. Everyone, make sure to follow along with the tour. We're going to have the link to the tour schedule down in the description box. Follow along. We have a lot of amazing Black content creators talking about this book. We're so excited for it. And just make sure you follow along on everybody's posts. We'll leave any social media that Christina has down in the link so you can go and keep up to date with whatever she does next. I'm excited to see whatever you do next, but I'm also excited for people to get a chance to read The Black Kids. And don't forget to order it when it's published. I was going to say released, but that would have worked too. Don't forget to read the book. And with that said, we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much.